Welcome to the Mother May I podcast with Frank and Irene on Strong Island Entertainment. Gee, I hope I didn't make a mistake with these two. They promised me they'd bring in some really good guests. Well, anyway, here's Frank and Irene.
Hello and welcome to Mother May I podcast with Frank and Irene. I woke up early as shit this morning to my alarm clock, Frank, and Adele's new song was playing, and I didn't want to get out of bed. Why is that bitch always so miserable? Anybody? Her song always every time I hear a new Adele song, I find a new reason not to want to live. It's crazy. Have you heard it?
No, I'm not familiar with Adele. I mean, I know who she is, but I try to keep up on modern pop music, but I can't keep up with everything. And Adele, I've heard she's a very talented young lady, but I'm too busy listening to the Mills Brothers and
Peggy Lee.
Peggy Lee. Oh, now you know who Peggy Lee is, see?
I do. I got a story for you, Frank. Were your ears burning this yesterday? Because, so Rena Zager, who's a mutual friend of ours, who I would have on this show, Frank, if you're wondering. However, Rena doesn't do Zoom or any of this kind of thing. She doesn't do it. So she ferried over, and I picked her up from the ferry wearing this T-shirt, the Rolling Stones T-shirt, in a predominantly black area. I got a lot of shade, and then it quickly dawned on me. Anyway, I went to pick her up, and we went all over Staten Island, and we're sitting down. We're going through these interesting structures. And then we were talking about old musicians, and she actually shamed me by bringing up Peggy Lee. And I said, you know what? It's on me that I didn't know who Peggy Lee was, because Rena knows who she is.
Yeah, she's very famous, but, from a different era. So if it's from a different era, I probably know everything about it. If it happened yesterday, I'm in the dark. I'm clueless. But that's my cross to bear.
No, but actually, Frank, that's not true. You know, one of the things that I love, and this is almost going to sound like a prelude to a dating site because I'm going to be your agent right now. One of the things I really love about you is you actually know everything about different eras, but then you're also so young at heart and know everything that's going on. You always stay very contemporary and in the loop about everything, Frank.
I'm, I try to keep up, and one thing that I'm very against, and I think is bullshit, is anyone from any generation saying, music, movies, etc. suck now. Everything was so much better when I was young, and everything is bad now. That historically, that has always been proven untrue. In other words, like the people in the 50s who said rock and roll was just a fly-by-night thing that was going to go away, like they were wrong, and people subsequent after that who said, oh, this is just a passing thing. And then, good music and quality art just lasts. And the thing I try to always avoid is to have a reactionary take on things, and there's a lot of that with people my age, especially baby boomers, which I am. We're like the most annoying generation ever. We get really dumb about stuff like that.
Well, I'm going to say yes. I often wish that baby boomers would. No, I'm just kidding. John would be very upset with me, but with the exception of you, Frank, and you're right. I feel like everything that comes out at any given time is a reflection of the time. You know what I mean? People,
and there's always like brilliant people in every. No time period is unique to only geniuses could be born between 1960 and 1967 or whatever. It's like every generation, every genre has geniuses.
That's right.
And you could say, oh, I don't like country music or whatever, but you can't say country music sucks because there are genius songwriters who work in that genre, just like people who think My favorite music, jazz, sucks, and there's a lot of them.
Jazz.
They're
I love jazz, but Frank, you know that I worked in a jazz club for
Right.
many years as my bartending tenure. I worked at Zinc Bar. I worked at, which was one of the top jazz places, and you also worked at the Bitter End. So I love jazz, and we had some really great jazz acts. But you're right. I think people are just generally really resistant to change. And resistant to like kind of straying outside their zip code, sort of speak.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly,
you know?
exactly.
So that's the deal. But thanks to you, I know more than I should about outdated things. I'm just kidding, Frank. Thanks to you, I'm smarter now. It's fantastic. And I could actually join in on the Peggy Lee conversation with Rena Zager last night. You know, I wouldn't be sitting
nice,
here
nice.
my ass. So anyway, I was going to, let's go ahead and bring on our guest. You're going to love Frank.
Please.
Very funny comic, just a really amazing person. Also, can I say this, co-owner and the wife to the also sweet and such a great guy, Emilio Savone, New York Comedy Club, comic, actress, co-owner of Comedy Club, and Savone, everybody.
Oh, thank you. You know, thank you, Irene. It's so good to be here. It's funny you say that because Emilio actually has a partner and but they have like an ongoing joke that nobody knows him because he's like secret. Like he never shows up. I don't know if you've ever met Scott, but like Scott is his partner. They're like married more than me and Emilio are. So it's so funny. Like I really have no say in the comedy club, but it's an amazing comedy club. Both of them are awesome. They've worked really hard for them, so it's really.
I can totally relate to that because Steve had a music club and I absolutely had nothing to do with it. I don't even consider myself as part of that. If he had like an untimely accident or we got divorced, I would not be part of that. He had also
Right.
he always liked to fly under the radar because he doesn't like to make he's not like a despotic person. He doesn't like to be the boss. So he had a guy do everything, and that was like sort of his partner in marriage. So I totally get that. I was joking that your donuts are giving Frank a Woody here because had to give them up. Frank, now I don't know if you guys have ever met, but you've been to New York Comedy Club and you saw the job that they did there. They revamped it.
I have been there, but you've just inspired me to be resentful that I haven't been there more. No, I'm kidding. It's great, and so it's back up and running. I'm assuming now after the pandemic, it's happening.
Yeah, I don't know. I think everything's at full capacity right now. I think most comedy clubs are at full capacity as long as you have proof of vaccination. I think that's most of like the restaurants and bars in New York City right now.
Most of the restaurants and bars in New York City, we Emilio and Ankara came to one of the Frank, you came to Fiore's Pizza, but they love Fiore's Pizza, and they were like the events that we did, and of course that didn't survive. It was a casualty of but
so sad. So many losses this year.
A lot of losses this year, and a lot of losses. I think that's a great segue into what we really want to talk about. I think we can all relate to this subject, losing somebody that we love. I know that you, Ankara, you were very close to your dad, and that it was very tough for you this past year because you actually lost him.
Yeah, I lost him. Yeah, like it was crazy. It was like right in the height of the pandemic, right when like New York you could like open your window and not hear a bird chirping. It was so quiet and weird. And we had to get on a plane and fly to Florida. I mean, it was terrifying, but like, I am so happy that I got to go and spend like the last month with him, while he was, my dad had been fighting cancer since I was 18 years old, but never been sick a day of his life. Like his whole cancer treatment was never sick, never had any issues, just went, to the doctors, got his checkups, got his medicine. Mm-hmm. But in the last year, he, it turned to like, now he's sick. And then, I mean, it's crazy. Once the pandemic hit, it was like his will was gone. Like, I think it was so traumatic because going to he had to go and get treatments in the middle of a pandemic. And that was, like he couldn't go with, my mom couldn't go with him. My sisters couldn't go with him. He had to go in the middle of like, when we were all scared, perfectly normally healthy people were scared, and go to the hospital and get like blood transfusions. And you don't even know what this virus is back then.
Wow.
I mean, for him to go through that anyway is just a horrible thing. But it's like the worst possible time.
Yeah.
To have to go to the hospital and to not have your family and friends able to be around you. It's just the worst.
It's tragic. Yeah. It's also, I'm wondering, was it easy for him to like go to the hospital and get the proper care? Because at that time they were so saturated and inundated with COVID cases. I know a lot of people had issues just getting care for other things, and other medical emergencies.
Yeah, so he had been going to this one hospital, and my dad was like a very big personality. Like, everybody loved him. Everybody knew him. You're like, Oscar, hey, what's up? And, so everybody in the hospital knew him. So, that was kind of like a blessing in disguise, where like they loved him so much that they bent over backwards. And even in that height, there was a 2-week period where he was in the hospital alone, and we were fighting to see him. We were like doing everything to get in there. And then finally, when they put him on hospice, they allowed one person in to be with him. And then we were just waiting to be discharged to take him home. And then we had a week with him at home. So, we had family coming and going, again, in the middle of a pandemic, like, and my mom's older, so we're worried about my mom. Nobody's vaccinated yet. Nobody even knows if there's a vaccination. So, and, my dad never wanted people to like cry. He was like, you guys have a big party for me. I want dancing and drinking and having a good time, and unfortunately we didn't get to do that. It's just like such a crazy window of time we didn't get to do, but we've been celebrating his life little by little over the last year. And like, it's brought my family closer together, which is,
that's important, because it can have the exact opposite effect and tear families apart. So when he was in the hospital, was he in that same hospital during his treatments throughout the year, that same hospital?
Yeah, but it was a separate part of the hospital. So he was like, not ER, but like he was in a hospital bed. So it had cancer treatment area, and then like the other side of the hospital where you're like in a room and you're getting blood transfusions, and they're trying to figure it. Like, it was just one thing after another. He kept getting like his body was just failing him,
His body shut down, yeah. It's crazy. Were you able to have a funeral for him, or because that was like right? I remember in the thick of it, my heart was breaking for you, and Yeah.
No, we didn't have a funeral. We had a memorial service with close family. But again, my mom was so scared. She didn't really want people coming because she was scared that everyone was going to get sick. Like when you lose someone, you're scared you're going to lose more people. So it's like the fact that we were supposed to gather, but we were able to have a service in a church, which is what, he would have wanted. And it was nice. We all spoke and had words, and we were able to at least do that. So.
That's amazing. I just want to clarify that I'm not a douchebag that just brings up the worst part of her life the blue. This was like sort of, and we conversed about this. We wanted to talk about loss and dealing with loss because you're ready to talk about it now, because I know you were devastated.
Yeah.
I lost my father. Frank's life is, I'm like, every time I hear the loss that you had to suffer, Frank, I mean, Frank has a lot of loss in his brain. Frank, would you like to
Yeah, I lost my keys yesterday.
That's pretty devastating.
And also, I really did lose my keys. But anyway, I lost my dad when I was 14, and he was very sick for like 5 years before then. He had a massive stroke, so he was incapacitated and being cared for. At home, we had a live-in male nurse who helped take care of him. That's why I've always been. And then when I had my heart surgery, it just reiterated. Well, I'm always like such a fan of medical workers. I think it's such a, not just the doctors, but the nurses and the orderlies and stuff. It's such a profession of service. So we had that, and then my mom died about 15 years ago. But she lived to be 80. You know, she had a long life. She had struggles when I was a kid. She she had a mental illness. You know, she was in and out of hospitals for depression, and she had shock treatments and stuff like that. But you know what? She came out of it eventually, and you know, she had her ups and downs, but she ended up really having a regular, productive life. You know, so that was a much more positive.
That's good.
Right. But Frank, you also lost your brother, which I think is so devastating.
Yeah. That was really devastating to me. My brother Rex, who I was very close with, we didn't live in the same city, but we talked on the phone all the time. And, you know, and he was so much like me and I was so much like him. We were so simpatico. We were on the opposite sides politically, but everything else was just complete. The things, you know, his sense of humor and my sense of humor were like exactly the same. And so, yeah, that was really devastating. I think because I was older than when my father died, like when my father died and I was so young, you know, I was aware of the gravity of it and it was really hard, but there's a part of you when you're younger that you can kind of just move on better, I think.
You're more resilient, maybe.
Yeah, you're more resilient. And my whole childhood was about rolling with the punches and moving on from one crisis after another. So I think like when my brother Rex died, you know, and I was a fully grown adult, I think I took it harder that time. You know, that was like really, really tough.
I can't even imagine losing a sibling. I was also rolling with the punches because my mother used to beat the shit out of me, Frank. Just bitch. I can't imagine losing a sibling. That to me is the top hardest. But it was so hard for me too because I lost my dad, and I really loved him. He was like the sweetest, loveliest, kindest man I've ever known in my life. And he was also sick for a couple of years. And, you know, we have to be prepared to let go of people that we love. Like for me, I wasn't able to do that. I was selfishly wanting him to leave, even though he was like really suffering. I kept saying, you don't go, Dad. And he literally was hanging on. And I remember he just looked at me and he said, you know, I don't know how much more I can hang on for you. He actually said those words. And I'm like, longer. No, I'm just kidding. To talk, but he was just literally ahead and he couldn't move at all. And there's something to be said about us being able to let go.
Let them go, yeah. And when they're suffering, and there's no avenue out, and I know we have a tendency, an instinct to just want them to be around, and no matter what, but they have to, you know, we have to, like you said, be willing to let them go so they can stop suffering and then move on to whatever the next world is.
Frank has this thing about anything that's like outside of the realm of Earth. Okay, come on, there is another world. We are energy. I truly believe your dad is in another place. Now, did you feel like you had to you also had to, obviously you have to prepare yourself, but did you have that moment that was poignant that you just like looked at your dad and you gave him permission to move on?
You know, it's interesting that you say that. So like I was hit with grief. I didn't know, like, I didn't understand what grief was going to be. I just thought it was like, oh, you're sad for like a year or whatever, but you move on. So like I had to really look at a lot of things. And I look back on my life, and when I was 18 and my dad was diagnosed with cancer, I thought that was when, like, I thought that was it. You know what I mean? So, like, I've been living with this fear that, like, my dad could go any second since I was 18 years old. Like, I keep moving forward, but I've always had this fear, which made me spend more time with him, call him more, like, do more with my family than I would normally do, because I was like, I don't know how much time I have with my family. So I'm really grateful for that. But, you know, my family has this joke. It's a dark joke. I mean, I guess whatever. Yeah. Jokes. Yeah. We're like, if we're like out of it, just like let us go. Like, we're not the kind of family that's like, keep you on a ventilator, we're like, all right, time to go. Almost to the point where like, all right, you're like walking and you're fine. You're like, time to go, you know, like, so my dad fought to the end. He fought so, I believed everything he ever told me. Like, he was very honest. He's like, the second I'm done, you will know. You know, I never had to ask him to keep fighting. I never had to. He had the will in himself, and he was full of joy all the time, full of joy. I don't know how he did it, honestly. He's full of joy. The moment he switched was when I was like, this isn't my dad anymore. You know, he was like, I can't do this anymore. And
down, you know?
that was really hard to see and really hard to hear. But I was like, okay, this is the moment that we've been talking about our whole lives. We have to let him go. Mm-hmm. And one of my sisters who's super, super religious, which I'm like, you know, but like, she really stepped up in a way where I was like, okay, this is the part where religion actually like really means something to me, or like prayer, or like letting him go. He needed to go. He was ready to go. It wasn't up to us anymore. It was up to some higher power or whatever, you know, like we're all human. We're all going to die. And I was like, okay, like a switch went off and I was like, okay, it's time to say goodbye. Now we just make it as peaceful and loving as possible. Mm-hmm. But then after it happened, that's when the denial came in after he was gone. I was like, wait, where's he? What happened? Where'd he go? Mm-hmm. No, this can't be. Like, who do I talk to? Who do I call? Who do I laugh with? Who's going to take care of me? Mm-hmm. Who's going to protect me? Who's like
Emilio a little bit?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I have to do this. I have to do this for myself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of like, you don't realize how much of a loss that person is, even though they mean a lot to you, but you also realize like how much they mean to you, even if they're not physically doing stuff for you. Like like, my dad was like my idol. Mm-hmm. So like having that and being like, well, what would my dad do in this situation? Some of that like kind of left when he died. I have to fight really hard to remember these things.
Wow.
That's a blessing, you know, that you had a dad, that you had that kind of relationship with, you know, that you considered him an idol, and that it wasn't like a lot of relationships people have with their parents where it's fraught with all kinds of drama and all kinds of issues, and you know, so I'm glad to hear that at least you had that in your life, you know.
Yep, yeah, that's a productive thing, you know. With my dad, he really, you know, I talk about this, you know, my dad was he was high functioning autistic, so there were a lot of his things in his life that were kind of very chaotic, and he was, you know, he just didn't have certain awarenesses, but he was literally the funniest man I've ever met in my life and the smartest man. And he was a storyteller. He would often tell like these very embellished big fish tales, you know, that we really enjoyed. And so I feel like even though he wasn't like the traditional father to me, he instilled certain skills for me that were survival. And the reason that I became a comic, I always said that my father was probably my impetus in this business to become a comic. And that's probably why I didn't want him to go. But like you said, you find that within yourself. My sister also ironically gave him permission. She said, Dad, you can let go. He died the next day. You know where I was? Doing a fucking spot. Okay. Here's you try living with yourself when you're doing a spot and you missed your father's last words. I beat myself up endlessly for not being there with him when he died. But you know what? At the end of the day, I feel like there's a bigger plan involved. I'm not going to.
No, I'm not going to do that. I agree.
Okay, there's a bigger plan in the sense that I felt like maybe my father didn't want me there to say goodbye because he had been holding on endlessly for me and he didn't want to go. So maybe it was easier for him to pass on.
Yeah.
And your father may be dying, but hey, maybe there's someone from SNL there in the audience or something.
Die anyway, right? But this could be my chance. Who's Mr. Hollywood's? And he would totally understand, you know. But so yeah, so these.
Also, you know what though, like being there for like is. I don't think it's for everybody, to be honest with you. Like it was, it's traumatic. Watching a life leave, it's traumatic. Yeah. So, you know, it might have not been like, it might have been so devastating for you that you wouldn't be able to continue your comedy, which is so connected to your father. So, you know what I mean? Like sometimes not seeing that is important to keep going.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I actually had to do a one-person show like I think was it the next night or the day after, like 2 days, because there was a little time in between with the funeral. I was in New York, and I actually did it. I couldn't believe it. The show must go on. I already fucked it with the spot.
Best. I think that can be the best way to move on with something.
Yeah.
Or not move on might not even be the best word. It's just like when something devastating happens, like if you can manage to still be in the world and doing things, I think it's very therapeutic and it's very helpful. It's very understandable if you're in mourning and you don't want to leave your house and you don't want to talk to anybody. But that, you can get trapped inside your own head that way. And I think it's healthier for people, even in a state of grief, to try to go out and do the things that they would normally do. It's helpful, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you know what? It was helpful. And I felt like in some way he was watching me and I did this and I felt good. And you know what, Ankara, you're right too. Maybe it would have been worse for me if I actually had to see him, pass away. It would have been worse. But I just, in my head, made up this story that it was easier for him to pass on because I wasn't there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it would have, it was hard for me. So who knows? Now, what are some of the things, if anybody, and we all have to lose somebody at some point in our lives, what were some of the things that you did that you felt were like helpful for you to sort of, start healing?
So and there was a pandemic, so I lost my job. I lost any reason to stay in New York, right? Other than like having to be with my husband who was trying to save his business, I was completely devastated. I felt a big yearning to be with my mom and to be with my sisters and my nieces and nephews. And I had the opportunity to do that. So I stayed a little bit in Florida and I was there for my sister in ways that she needed. There's so much paperwork that goes after death that they don't tell you about. And she already had so much on her plate and she was the one that was assigned it. So just being there for my mom, taking a lot of the weight off of her, my sister, was helpful for me too. Like being of service to my mom was helping me heal because I could be there for her. And so I spent a lot of time with my family. Then it got to a point where I was like, okay, I need to get back to New York. I need to start doing stuff for myself, or else I'm just going to get stuck in this state. So I came back to New York and I was like, okay, I'll try to get back on stage. And I got back on stage and I was like, wow, I'm doing so good. Holy shit. That was denial stage. Cause I was like, I'm fine. I'm like, this is so empty. Like, this is so empty. Like I was still telling like old jokes about my dad being alive. I'm like, I have to kill my dad on stage. Like I can't do these jokes anymore. So in that moment, I was like, I need to take a break from comedy too. Like, this is just too much for me. Like, I kind of just had like a breakdown. I was like, I just need to stop.
When you said that, you know what? I literally got chills when you said I had to kill my dad on stage. That is like so fucking deep what you just said. And I didn't even realize that I did that as well. 90% of my material was about my dad, and I can still tell them in stories, but literally he was part of my act and I had to stop doing that.
Yeah. That my dad is a huge part of my act. My dad, like you, he was probably the main reason I started doing comedy. You know what I mean? Like he was just the funniest guy. A lot of my humor is from him. So, and he was so proud that I did comedy. Like he loved comedy, he just like loved it so much. So like, that was just, yeah. And like, I really want to honor him in everything I do. And like, I was like, all right, well, I need to heal. I need to figure what, like, cause I like, couldn't even like get out of bed. I was like, I just need to like start over. I was like, I need to learn how to go outside for walks. I need to learn how to go grocery shopping. I need to learn how to like take care of myself again, because I just like didn't have the will to like, I was exhausted and like I was knocked on my feet, and I just was like, let me be easy on myself and start over and start from the bottom and start like taking care of myself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, blah, 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 blah. Eventually I will have the amount of material that I need to write about my dad when I'm ready.
Right. Well, Frank's dad was quite hot, and Rachel Feinstein and I actually got a little excited when you whipped out that photo of him. He was gorgeous.
Oh, really?
He was like this badass, like hot-looking journalist. And so, Frank, what about you? I don't think I ever asked you this question. Like, So did you ever have aspirations to become a journalist? And who was there somebody in your family?
That's a path in life I could have taken had circumstances been different.
You would have been great.
But because I am it is writing, and I am a writer, and
a brilliant one.
Oh, God bless you.
You're brilliant. Come on, you know it. Come on, you're going to be humble now. He is brilliant. He's funny. He's smart. You could have easily been a fucking very successful journalist. But
but I think that what I was about to say is that because I grew up in such a family with no structure, where both parents were were either in the hospital or incapacitated at home. When my mother wasn't in the hospital, but when she was still in the throes of her mental illness, she was one of those people who was just in her bathrobe all day and didn't leave the room, So it was, I didn't have the structure and guidance to go down the path where I did well in school and got good grades so I could graduate, so I could go to college. And I think if I had that in my DNA, like journalism was something, because I admired my dad when I was a kid. It was something I thought about, but I never pursued. I became so fucked up on drugs and stuff, and I just kind of drifted for a few years.
You drifted.
And, so I had to enter the only occupation that was open to losers like me, stand-up comedy, No,
but Frank, I have questions. This is so fascinating to me. Okay, so I also had a very structureless existence, and, I don't feel like anybody ever watched. My mother was an immigrant. My dad had blazing fucking code red autism. Okay, let's just call it what it is. Right. So I don't feel like I had that structure either. And then I became a comic as well. But I feel like for you, did other members, like my whole family is the same. Like we're college dropouts. I did try to pursue college, but it never worked out. But I feel like what about your siblings? Like Rex, for example. You said Rex was really funny. He was older than you. Yeah,
Rex. Right? No, Rex was younger than me, actually.
Oh, he was younger than you? Okay.
And he was very funny, but Rex, he was similar to me in that he wasn't able to really find a path like into going to college or anything like that. And what he actually ended up doing was he joined the Army, and then he was in the Army for a long time. And as far as I can tell from my communication with him during his Army years, his main duty protecting the country was to sit on the base in Monterey, California, like the most beautiful place in the world, and tape episodes of SCTV for me. That was like kind of his service to the country. So yeah, he had that kind of path. But it's really interesting too, because the way you can all come from the same dysfunctional family. My brother Tony was like me too. He couldn't go down that path, but he became a musician, and he's still to this day a professional musician, songwriter, producer, teacher. But then like my other siblings, my brother Mike,
how many brothers? No wonder your mother lost her mind. Jesus.
The half of it, but my brother Mike, he excelled scholastically, and he went to Harvard.
Wow! I forgot.
And my sister also excelled scholastically, and she went to the University of Chicago.
Wow.
So it's just everybody has their own way. And you've met Lucy, and you know.
I love her. Oh my God.
Yeah, and she, at the same time when we were both in high school, that I was like smoking pot all the time, drinking all the time, taking acid. She was like studying, in other words, and getting straight A's. In other words, her reaction to the craziness in our home was to lose herself in her studies, whereas I lost myself in being a stoned out hippie loser, So I think it's kind of fascinating the way people react differently and deal with a situation.
Yeah, but also
in their own way, So
Yeah.
I can't really blame the fact that I was such a dysfunctional family, which is why I was such a bad student. I was just disposed to be a bad student because although I'll admit that I'm smart, I have that kind of daydreaming kind of mind where like I can't focus and learn things if I'm supposed to learn them. If it's something I'm interested in, like writing and comedy and show business and movies, like I'll learn everything about that stuff and know more about it than other people. But it was all a pleasure for me to learn all of it, If it's not a pleasure for me to learn, then I don't learn, which is not a great attribute to have in life, I don't think.
Right, and you know what? That's so true, Frank. And you know what? At the end of the day, we're all exactly where we need to be, and you have confidence in what you do, whereas you would have maybe not had any confidence because you said you have to have this yearning to learn certain things. And if you're in school and you're fucking looking out the window and thinking about, the things that really interest you, then it's better to be a success at what you're doing than a failed student. Unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, I think for any person in life, the way to have success in life is to follow what you're interested in. And,
I was a failure.
Where they may. Because as you know, in this business, I've had periods in my life where I just felt like an incredible failure, when I wasn't getting jobs and stuff and I wasn't working. And we all have to go through those things. But when we come out at the other end and we're doing stuff that we like and we're making a living at it, like that makes the struggle worth it. But it can be a real struggle, as you all know.
Well, Frank, you lost me and make a living at it. You had me the whole fucking time, Frank, and I was gone. So, Ankara, when you got back on stage and you started sort of like, you've been performing, and I saw that you're doing that. How were your shows because you came out of this COVID, your dad, you're finally getting out again. How was that for you when you started doing stand-up? So talking about,
so I'm not one of those comics that writes a lot and has a lot of new jokes, new. I kind of approach my stand-up like an actress or like an actor. Do you know what I mean? Like I have I write it out, I memorize it, I perform it, and then I take it to stage. Now, and that's what I did before. Now I'm kind of trying new things. I'm I'm just going to try some things on stage and see what happens. And if it's not funny, it's not. If it is, great. There's less pressure now after the pandemic. So it's easier to kind of just bomb on stage because everything feels like a bomb right now, like park shows, roof shows. It's just but the first show back was really awesome. I felt like I was whoa, I belong, right? And then I'm okay. And then I got offered a bunch of spots, and I was I didn't really have time to work on new stuff, so I was just doing the same set. And then I was I think I was just getting bored with the set, and I was So I'm getting back into it, and I'm excited to write new jokes. I need to sit down and write new jokes. I'm excited to write what's happened in the last year. I'm getting back, and I'm also a people person. I love doing improv because it's just engaging with other people on stage, right? I just have fun playing games.
It's hard to do improv. I feel
love
like
it
you
so
have to
much.
be very intelligent to do improv. I took an improv class at UCB, the whole yes and it's very daunting, to do that.
It's interesting you say that because I feel like improv and stand-up are two very different things, and stand-up feels the same way about improv, right? They both are I could never do. But I think stand-ups I think both are really smart. I think you can be really smart or really dumb in both and still be successful. Because it's about being funny. It's just about being funny. And improv is about having fun on stage, connecting, and building a scene. And the stakes are great.
I've done a couple of shows at UCB. May it rest in peace, at least the New York one. I did. I was in the ASCAT show where I was the one who came out and told a story, and then they improvised based on, taking whatever my story was, and then they do an improv on it, and it was just dazzling to watch them, and it really is. I mean, I know that I'm like a really good ad-libber. I can ad-lib, but that's a whole different.
Yes.
Like, improv is a whole different skill. What they were doing is something you have to learn how to do. I mean, it was just on this incredible high level. It really made me realize that, like even though I'm like, I can be quick on my feet and stuff. Like, I couldn't just go into that improv troupe tomorrow and keep up with them, because I would have to spend the years that they've spent doing it every night, just like with stand-up, doing it every night, developing the skill and everything. But I did the show with them in LA, and I did it in New York. And I have to say, after watching them, you can't help but realize that that improv really is, at its best, it's a great art form. At its worst, it's horrible, but it's
awful. Yeah, it's worse. It's awful.
Say the same about stand-up comedy too.
Yeah,
and they do. But you're absolutely right. There's such it's so difficult. It's other level. I took that class at UCB. I took a few classes, and it was so interesting. I think it actually made me a much better stand-up at the time too.
I think it does. Yeah.
It's it's using a muscle that we are not used to using or to that level, as Frank stated, even in stand-up. So I think it's always good to have like different knowledge of different forms of art. It's only going to enhance your performance on stage. And Ankara, in terms of like what you said, the way I've noticed that stand-up has become almost like like before the pandemic, stand-up was a certain way, and I've done a lot of shows, and stand-up now is almost become self-conscious, and I'm talking about the audiences. Between the social distancing and the divisiveness with everything going on, I feel like audiences aren't going to come out and uproariously laugh anyway. There's like a different thing. And so this is the time, like, what's the worst thing, like you said, what's going to happen? Like, I made a little pact with myself that once the pandemic cleared, when I came out, I was only going to do new material. That's it. If it got laughs, if it didn't get laughs, I didn't give a fuck, because I needed to get something out of this myself. We just came out, all of us collectively came out of a near-death experience. It was a ubiquitous near-death experience. Like, the only thing that we have to lose is not growing at this point,
Yeah.
I love the fact that you're taking risks.
Yeah, I mean, I think like once you get on stage, I think you realize you have to. You can't ignore the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, everything's upside down, so who cares?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I listened to Irene talk about how she was going to do all new material, and I was inspired by that. So when I got up and did stand-up, I did a couple of new jokes,
Frank, you're so prolific. Stop your bullshit. I mean, I take that as a huge...
But I did feel like I couldn't... And I've only performed I've only done stand-up like 3 times since the pandemic. And, and I did new material. But it's funny too, because I did material. I did new material about my heart surgery, which I hadn't done before the pandemic, even though I'd already had the heart surgery. And I think with some things, you just need distance from them, like right after it happened, like I was sick of it. I didn't want to talk about it. You know what I mean? And now I'm kind of ready to throw some jokes in about it. And they're all my usual, juvenile, silly jokes. They're not like an in-depth look at the horror of facing one's mortality. They're basically cum jokes, but
but you know what? They always have a point. It's like if you, I just tweeted out that Joan Rivers thing. If you can laugh at it, you can deal with it. And you know what?
I love that.
I love that so much. And Frank, also, when you just came out of your heart surgery, you were so vulnerable too, and I feel like now it's distance definitely, but I think all of us also came out of another atrocious thing that happened. So now this seems, not that your quadruple heart surgery was light by comparison, Frank. Okay, but I'm saying a lot of anything that we felt might have been too deep to talk about on stage. Now, obviously, we all went deep, so we have a different perspective.
Yeah.
You know? But even through your heart surgery, Frank, you know, you might have not been cracking jokes on stage, but you still had everybody visiting you, you know.
Well, I was lucky, you know, and when I hear about your father and his illness happening in the midst of the pandemic, I mean, I feel so much for you because I realize how lucky I was that when I had my medical emergency, people could come and visit me. Yeah. When I got home, like people were always coming over to the house, like Irene and all my friends were coming over and hanging out. And they made it like, you know, so much.
It's healing.
Yeah, I noticed that there was a lot of girls visiting Frank. Like, it wasn't even one guy. It was always like hot little.
Quadruple bypass is a huge turn on, as you know. So.
It's a pussy magnet, Frank. You better believe it, sweetie, and it worked for you.
Hot.
So we're running out of time, but Ankara, I want to know, okay, so our closing thought for you, like, because you've been through so much and you really are literally one of the sweetest persons in this business, always kind to everybody, incredibly funny, but always nice and kind and sweet to everyone, not only on social media, but in real life, because there's that separation too. What kind of advice would you give somebody who's like suffering loss or went through what you were going through? What would you tell them? What's a good piece of advice to help them, you know, just heal?
Yeah, I would say go easy on yourself, like really easy on yourself, and pick like one or two people in your life that you really trust, that aren't judgmental, that you can really talk to and tell anything to, that aren't going to tell you that you should do this or you should go there or you should do that. Because you know, I shared a lot of I'm an open book. Like I like to, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I think that if I share something, maybe it'll help someone else. Right. And a lot of people had a lot of pushback for me. Like, you should do this, you should do that. And I'm like, actually, I didn't ask for you. So I realized who I didn't want to talk to anymore and who I did want to talk to and who truly did care about my well-being and like cared about what I cared about. Like maybe they had a different opinion about what they thought, but they could see, oh, Ankara's saying that she needs this. Let me encourage her in that direction instead of them trying to fix me in a way that they thought was necessary. Nobody, at a certain point, people don't want to hear about it anymore, you know? But I found, you know, keeping one or two people really close. And then like I started going to bereavement groups, and that was a huge turn for me.
Very good.
I started talking to people that had lost, and I was like, okay, I'm not alone. Because
were you doing it on Zoom? I'm just curious.
I did it on Zoom. Yeah, I did it on Zoom. Yeah. And then I joined a bunch of bereavement groups on Facebook. Like, it was just nice to see positive stuff instead of all the BS and politics. I stopped watching the news. I haven't watched the news since January. I don't know what's happening. Are we at war? What's happening?
Right there.
That's right. That's
I really. Yeah. So just extreme self-care. You have to. It's survival. For me, it was survival. I had no choice.
It's so good, the bereavement groups. And, you know, I've done NAMI groups, and I'm going to do it again for mental illness support for anybody who has family members. You can do everything on Zoom now. You don't even have to leave your house, which is a lot of good things did come out of the pandemic. But that's awesome. Now, on a more professional level, you have a new Kick-Ass podcast coming out. I did see that.
Yes, I do.
So tell everybody where they can see that and when that's going to drop and all that good stuff.
Okay, cool. It should be dropping in the next month. We do have a social media handle on Instagram. It's at Dumb Podcast. You'll see this is my background for it. So every time I'm on Zoom, it's going to be donuts. And yeah, we're excited. It's just going to be me and my girlfriend, Rachel, who does stand up. Also, we met doing improv, just talking about dumb stuff and like having fun, having a good time. Yeah. And also I just started doing improv on Armory House Team, 9:30s on Friday nights. If you want to come out, the Armory and the Tank. So yeah.
I want to come out. I need to see you. We need a proper,
yes.
We need a proper Mr. Frank Conniff, when is your next Fabulous Mads show?
Well, it's actually this Saturday night at 10 p.m. Trace, Bill, you and I are rebroadcasting our riff of the movie called Walk the Dark Street. It's one of the worst movies we've ever done and one of our funniest riffs. So go to eventbrite.com and type in the Mads, and you should be able to find it. It's this Saturday, and there's like a big, and with the reruns, like people have watch parties on Twitch and YouTube, and those are really fun. So, and it's only $10.
That's amazing. And you are always so great on that. I love it. I actually can't wait to catch it live on Cara. I say this to every guest. Maybe I'll do it with one of them when they're live again. We should go. Okay.
Yes.
I'm Irene. Anything I do is going to be on, I'll just post it on Instagram at Irene Bremis or Twitter. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love you guys. Thank you for being here, Frank.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you, Ankara. We'll see you next week.
Nice to meet you, Ankara. You're
Okay,
awesome.
nice to meet you, Frank. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Mother May I podcast with Frank and Irene on Strong Island Entertainment. Check us out next week when Frank and Irene sit down with, you know what? I don't know what these two are going to do next, but we'll see you next week.